should make every item in the League of Legends item shop! With that dramatic introduction out of the way, and a slightly less dramatic introduction about to come, I just want to let you know that this build took roughly an hour, not including drying time, and involved only a sharp knife, some Ava foam, and a mixture of acrylic paints. Nothing else. It should be that simple. Hey gals, guys, and everyone else, welcome to a new kind of series where I'm going to try and make a bunch of things for the sake of making things. And these things are, I want to try my hand at making basically a bunch of different things from the in-game shop of League of Legends. I know they're not like, you never see them, a character buys them, they don't appear on them, so we don't know what they look like. We've just got these tiny little icons. But you know, that gives us a wide range of space to experiment in and try a bunch of new tactics and tools and different ways of making. And of course, where else do you start when you're talking about League of Legends items? Sorry, someone wants attention. Where else do you start with a League of Legends items but Dorans items? Yes, it is Doranuary, but because it is the simplest one of all of the items, we're going to start with the Dorans Ring. And as all civilized things should start, this starts with a cup of tea and biscuits. These biscuits have a layer of caramel on them, which of course is integral to their integrity when dunking. Speaking of actually important things, first we need to think about the size of the band we're doing, because I really feel like whilst we could design a little metal ring for this, either design it in CAD and get it 3D printed, or go and try and forge one in a proper jewellery experience, as in fact I did last year, I think something like this, since it has this open split at the end, it seems to be a bit more like a bangle, which of course will look a bit better whilst being worn because it's going to be more obvious. And if we wrap this around our big chunky sleeves, we can actually even have it so it can be worn over other League of Legends cosplays, because of course these are items that all sorts of characters in the game use, and therefore all sorts of champions with whatever kit, from tiny Jinxes to big chunky Silases. So let's stop thinking about chunky Silases and get on with preparing what we're doing. We start off with a fresh, sharp knife for cutting our Ava foam. Here we're using LD45 or Plasterzote, possibly the highest quality and definitely industry standard EVA foam for fabrication, for doing mascot suits, for doing stuff for low budget sci-fi. It's everywhere. And as you can see, I cut a flat edge with my metal rule, which then allows me to use a set square to measure a consistent depth, so we can get a consistent width of roughly 5 centimeters. As it being 1 centimeter thick, the foam, I think that was a good ratio for how chunky the object looks. And then it was just a simple matter of cutting it into segments that we could then glue together to create a ring. And of course the essential step of realizing that you've cut them at 45-degree angles, so they add up to be 90-degree angles, and then you have to try and do maths live on stream, and well, don't do what I do and cut it at exactly a 45-degree angle, because then it won't even go together. In fact, you want to cut it at a 45-degree angle rather than a 90-degree angle, or well, not a 45-degree angle. You want to cut it at a 22.5-degree angle technically, because the two angles glued together will add up to a 45-degree angle. And with those live stream maths done correctly, we go back and we use a second strip that I actually cut at the start, just in case I messed up, because I've met me and I know it can happen, and everyone probably has this happen. So I cut them at the 22.5 degrees, and then, well, it happens again. Wow, I'm dumb! Guys, I am super dumb. Despite cutting them at the right angle, I did them all in the same direction, so instead of doubling back on each other, they created a wave! can we agree? This goes no further. So hey everyone, we're starting our Dorans blade. Right, we're starting Dorans Ring right now. This is our first time trying this. And with the lies and agreement with my stream chat out of the way, we get back to cutting our Dorans Ring properly. Because these want to be basically rhombuses with a shorter top side to bottom side and each angle at 22.5 degrees or thereabouts. Because there's 8 segments, divide 360 by 8, you get 45, and then divide that again, you get 22.5 because the 2 angles of the joins add up to make the total amount. It's maths! Probably. So what we want to do is we want to cut 8 segments. I in fact cut 9 because, of course, we're doing this by eye. You could use a protractor as you go and make it a lot more accurate, but if we add an extra piece in, since the art is very cartoonish, I don't think it'll matter. If you aren't particularly accurate and there's not enough and it doesn't go around to a full circle with 8, just put 9th in there. No one really notices the really specific details, especially since this is supposed to be the easiest thing in the world to make. So don't hold yourself to too high standards, because the most important thing about this is to make something rather than trying to perfect something. We're doing a little trick that I like to do when it comes to putting different bits of, when it comes to gluing Ava foam together, is you put quite a large dollop on one side of the 2 pieces that you're gluing together, and then you rub the 2 pieces together, and then that creates a really nice thin film on both sides. If you've got a little bit too much left over, then you go on to the next piece and wipe off the excess with the next piece, and you can carry on doing that. That way you're wasting as little glue as possible, but also making sure to get a consistent thin application, because contact adhesive, as we're using, and as I would definitely advise for gluing together Ava foam, you want to have a very thin application on both surfaces, let the solvents from it evaporate a little bit until it goes tacky and no longer wet, and then you put them together. And this is a good way to make sure that it is nice and thin, because if it's too thick, the solvents take forever to evaporate, and when you put them together, you're just squishing liquid around and they just won't glue together. So there's a good crossplay basics lesson in this. And success! It not only goes together, it fits around my hand and over my big chunky sleeve. However, as you can see, there's the little split in there. We're going to propagate the split over 2 of the segments, and we're using a nice sharp scalpel blade for this, but you can use whatever sharp knife you've been using, because the less sawing motions you have when you cut foam, the neater the cut will be. And there it goes. It works quite nicely as an angle. Now, to try and make it look a bit more authentic and not just like a couple of blocks of foam glued together, we're going to add a little bit of weathering, and this is, in my opinion, the most fun part when it comes to prop builds, is weathering when it comes to painting or just putting the actual damage on it. And we're just cutting consummate V's into the sides to have little nicks out of it, and then around some of the sharper corners we're taking big chunks out of it where it would have like taken an actual hit or a blow on some of the leading edges, trying not to go too over the top. And then there's one other little touch that you will thank yourself for further down the line, and that we require the sewing kit. Get out the sewing kit, get out a single bit of thread, take a length of it off, fashion it into a little hoop, add a little bit of contact adhesive to the bottom of it, and push it through with the blunt side of a knife into a flat, unobtrusive surface of the prop you're working on. If the prop is particularly large, you might have to sew it in around something, but once that's dry, it'll give you something to hang it off when you are painting it. And as we get set up for painting, I just want to give you a little bit of a spoiler for the other things we did in the couple of on-stream recording sessions. We did the other Dorans items at the same time as the ring. So if you want to keep up to date with the other items that I might make in the future, you can go back and have a look at the VODs for these, or stick around, subscribe to the YouTube channel, follow me on Twitch. Also, comment below if you can think of an item you really want to see in real life from League of Legends. Well, the item shop mainly, all of the actual character props, There's loads of cosplayers who have done those fantastically well. And to keep with the super simple aesthetic of this build, we're not adding any flexible paints, we're not priming the foam, because you can definitely, with just cheap acrylics you can get from the store, have a good looking object. So we're just mixing a little bit of water with some silver paint. We've added some black to the silver paint to make it a little bit darker to go along with the splash art, and we're just base coating the whole thing gunmetal silver. We're using the most expensive thing probably in this entire build to do this, which is the paintbrush. So that would be a good investment for you in the future. And then we're using that hook that we sewn on earlier to hang this over a radiator so it dries nice and quick, because by far and away the thing that takes the longest with this whole build process was actually waiting for the different layers of paint to dry. And it is pretty important to have them dry before we go on to the next stage. And whilst it's hanging up, you might be able to get some bits that you can just touch up and have your other arm get in the way of the camera so nobody can see what you're actually doing. And you might have just spotted a cat back there. Yeah. You're gonna have to go back. You're gonna have to go back about 15 seconds to see the cat. Normally, I would spray an object like this with something that was quite flexible, because it would avoid this kind of powdery surface finish to these items. But because I want to reduce the overall amount of investment you have to put in to make an object like this, I want to avoid you having to buy anything but acrylic paint. So what we're going to do now is, now that we've got the base coat down, we're going to use a fluffier brush, which is also, this was probably a $5, to dry brush the entire surface with that silver paint that we had before, but without the black added. So it's a little bit lighter, and this means all of the high areas, all of the edges, all of the flat surfaces that we'll go over will get a more metallic sheen added to them. You load the brush up with a little bit of paint, then you wipe a fair amount of it off until it is just quote unquote dry. And the good thing about that is, because you're putting so little paint on, it's actually basically dry immediately, which means we can then go on to the edge highlighting. For a project like this, I wouldn't really worry about shading. That's kind of dealt with by the dry brushing, leaving contrast. So we're taking that same silver paint, adding a little bit of white paint. Again, I wouldn't advise lightening paint by adding white or black, but since this is such a simple process and it's such a simple colour, the silver, adding a little bit of white to it means we can then go around with our other paintbrush and just highlight all of the leading edges, all of the little corners, put a little T at the corners, go around to the bits of battle damage where the metal would be broken raw, and just touch them all up ever so slightly. And that will give an overall more cartoonish but also metallic effect to the entire thing. And there we have it, made with no special equipment, only a knife, foam and acrylic paint, and we have a prop. You can imagine this as a process expanding outwards to all sorts of smaller or larger foam builds, and we used nothing special for this. And I hope that really inspires you to try something. Although, as a bonus round, we're going to spray this with Plastidip. It's a clear vinyl based paint system, but what I really like to do with it, if I've painted something with a non-flexible pigment, I will then give it a clear coat of Plastidip over the top, because that will hold it on and basically seal it to it. So sometimes when I'm airbrushing and the airbrushing pigment isn't flexible, I will use Plastidip over the surface to make sure it is held on. And that's our prop. That is our Dorans Ring, our Dorans bangle, if you will. But I'm really happy with that. It's an hour's work, and hopefully if you're following along, you'll have something equally as nice. Instead of an outro card, I'm just going to give you 30 seconds of me petting a cat, so hopefully that's equally nice. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!